All right. Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. All right. So let's get started. And can you see the slide? I've got it on a different screen here. Okay. Fantastic. So, good morning and namaste, everyone. This is Atul, and we are covering Ayurveda and the mind. So some of the key concepts will be Atma and Manas. And we'll talk a little bit about the sort of philosophically different approach that we take in Ayurvedic discussions of mind. So let's begin. So here's the second slide. So the learning objectives. We want to understand, define, and be able to paraphrase the concept of Atma. Okay. We want to understand the concept of Brahman and list the difference between Shakti and Shaktiman. Now, these are philosophical concepts from Vedanta, but we believe that these are really fundamental to the Ayurvedic understanding of mind, or the understanding of mind by the sages who originated the study of Ayurveda. Okay, so let us start with Brahman. So you see this, the Brahman slide? I'm just checking one last time to make sure. Uh, Great. So who is Brahman? Brahman is the unlimited, almighty divine in the aspect of being all powerful. We use Brahman is a neuter. It is a neutral noun. It's not. It's neither masculine nor feminine, because this is the not personal form of the divine. It's the effulgent and all-powerful form of the divine. You know, when people talk about the divine as being, the white light, the effulgent, this is Brahman. Another aspect of the divine is Paramatma. Paramatma is the I've got something in the way here. Paramatma is the omniscient and omnipresent aspect of the divine. So, who is present within the heart? Who is, within the heart of every being? That is Paramatma. And then Bhagavan. Bhagavan is the personal aspect of the divine. This is the divine as a supreme personality, as the maintainer, controller, protector, the reservoir of bliss or ananda. Now, these are three aspects, and we talk about aspects because aspects are an important part of understanding how you can have one concept that we see from multiple sides. And the Atma has a connection with seeking bliss. And this is the quotation from Vedanta Sutra, Anandamayo Bhyasat. It means that basically the Atma has within it the nature to seek Ananda. Now, Ananda is translated as bliss. What do we really mean by bliss? We mean pure, unadulterated spiritual happiness, happiness that doesn't end. It's not something that's temporary, like we get some happiness from eating something that we like, but that happiness is always mixed with distress. There's always a mixture of things. Ananda is bliss that is directly perceived by our spiritual self. And that's part of what we're going to talk about. And this is all very connected to understanding the mind. All right. So we have these three aspects of the divine, and we have Atma. So that's our definition here. So the divine exists in both masculine and feminine form. This is also a very important concept. So the there's kind of this Western idea that in many of the Abrahamic religions, in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, we tend to think of God as the father, so, and this leads to kind of a patriarchal worldview. We do not see it this way according to Vedanta. We see that the divine exists both as gods and as goddesses. This is very, very important. So the feminine form of the divine is Shakti. So Shakti is energy, both energy in tangible and intangible forms. You can also say Shakti is power, and you can say Shakti is the feminine aspect of the divine. And Shaktiman is the powerful, the wielder and possessor of energy and power, or the controller of energy. Now, somebody might say, oh, well, there you go. You're getting all patriarchal again. No, we're not, because in this understanding of Vedanta, where does the Atma fall? Is the Atma under the realm of Shaktiman or Shakti? Right? The Atma is Shakti, but it is a minute part of Shakti. So the Atma is actually part of the feminine aspect of the divine. It's our nature to be predominated, to serve, and therefore the role of trying to be a purush, trying to be an enjoyer and a controller, is actually somewhat contrary to the nature of the Atma. And if you think about it, you think about how we derive more lasting happiness when we serve out of love and we do things that are selfless. That is because it's in our nature to serve. That's part of who we are, and whether our bodies are male or female. So we're talking really about the underlying spiritual identity. Now, Prakriti is nature. This is the feminine side of creation, which is a manifestation of Shakti within the realm of this material world. And the Purusha is the masculine side of creation, or a manifestation of Brahman in contact with Prakriti for the purpose of enabling creation. So the divine is manifest as the Purusha, who is represented here as Shambhu or Shiva. You see a picture of Shiva riding on Nandi, the bull, accompanied by goddess Durga, who is the predominating goddess of this material world. She is the boss, basically. She is Prakriti personified, and she is riding on a tiger who represents Rajogun Tamogun. Okay. So this is the kind of the underlying concept. So let's move on. So we are now starting to, we are kind of breaking down the background for Sankhya philosophy. And how does this relate to this world? So you have a spiritual realm, which is eternal, full of knowledge, and it is blissful. So Shaktiman is the supreme powerful, Shakti is the supreme power, and they exist together. And there's these three aspects, Sat, Chit, and Ananda. We are here. We are in this material world, the mundane realm. It is temporary. It's changeable. It's not imaginary. It's real, but it's covered by illusion. and we're subject to ignorance, and there is some happiness, but it's also mixed. It's mixed with some pain. So the Purusha, or the masculine principle, and the Prakriti, or the fertile manifestation of the feminine principle, come together in the process of creation. This is in Sankhya, where we have the concept of Purusha and Prakriti. So just, the quick review of Sankhya, you have the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And there is also ahankar, or ego. Ahankar in sattva gun produces mind. Now, we're really getting to the subject. I know you've been thinking so far, wait a minute, we were going to talk about manas. We were going to talk about mind, and you're telling me all this Vedanta stuff, all this philosophy. But this is what we're coming to, and what puts this all in relevance now. When we talk about how ahankar in sattva gun produces mind, it's important because mind will be balanced in sattva gun. When we are able to be in a peaceful, clean, enlightened environment, the mind is most balanced. Ahankar in rajogun produces intellect. When the intellect is busy and it has things to do, it has things to create, then the intellect is balanced and the intellect thrives. And it is ahankar in tamogun that produces all of the substance, the senses, the body, the elements, and the objects of sense perception. When we have too much contact with matter, it brings us more into tamogun. Like, for example, you eat, oh, here's something that's very tasty. I like the way this tastes. I eat a lot. It makes me want to sleep. If we increase the matter in our existence, it makes us more dull. And the person who is able to exist in a more pure spiritual state, they will have more clarity of mind. Okay, so now we start to talk about the layers of the subtle and physical body. So there's the layer of ego, or ahankar. There's the layer of intellect, or buddhi. There's the layer of mind, or manas. So mind is consciousness, and mind permeates the subtle and physical bodies via the vital force, or pran. So now we're starting to talk about who we are. So really, the thing that gives us life is the Atma, but the Atma is wrapped in all of these layers. We have this translation of ahankar, and ahankar is the I, me, and mine part of our consciousness. That's where we identify and we think of who we are. It's kind of like a glue that binds us. So let's talk about these layers in depth. So first of all, there's the Atma. The Atma is the self, or soul. It animates the subtle body. And the functions of mind, intellect, and physical body are all related to Atma. Now, does anyone remember? We said Atma is a spark of the divine. Is it a spark of the feminine aspect of the divine, or masculine? So which aspect of the divine is Atma part of? Feminine. That's correct. Yes. So, and this is true. The Atma has nothing to do with whether we are male, female, cisgender, transgender, intersex, whatever we are. The Atma is pure and spiritual, but it's by ahankar that we identify with our bodily role. So this is actually a very important thing. So let's talk about Atma. Now, we have the subtle body, and here's this, this illustration. The subtle body is shown kind of as a little outline. What's the subtle body, or the Sukshma Sharir? It's the ego, the mind, and the intellect. And these carry the Atma from one physical body to the next. In Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says that just as the wind carries different types of aromas from one place to the other, similarly, the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharir, carries the Atma from one body to the next. So we have one subtle body. As long as we're in this world, the Atma is wrapped in this subtle body. The subtle body changes, it stretches, it morphs, it changes shape. The subtle body can inhabit, uh, can be in a baby body, and it can be in the body of an old person. It can even be in the body of an animal. We adapt, the subtle body adapts according to the physical body. When the Atma has left our physical body, along with the subtle body, there is no life. We say, oh, this person has died. And, sometimes we cry over that body. We see that body that is now a dead body, whereas once we looked and we saw life in their eyes, that life that we saw in their eyes was really what is coming from the Atma, filtered through the ego and the pran and the mind and the senses. But now we're just seeing a dead body, and it makes us sad because we feel like, oh, there's this person I knew and they're not here anymore. Well, they've just gone somewhere else. They're not inhabiting that body anymore. It's like if you go to an apartment and there's a good friend of yours living there, and you have a good time and you talk and you eat together and you do things, and then your good friend moves out and they go to another country, and you don't have any way to get in touch with them. And if you were to go to that same apartment, it's now an empty apartment, and there's no life in it, and it makes you sad because you think, oh, I spent time with my friend here and they're not here anymore. So the Atma is a catalyst for life. When the Atma is present, then we say that this person is alive, and when it's gone, we say they have died. The presence of the Atma, filtered through the ego and mind, is manifest throughout the physical body via the circulation of pran. So all the things that we do in the yoga process are meant to, to have a balancing of the mind, and through the control of asana and pranayam, to give us balancing of the Atma. That's the whole purpose, so that we can focus the mind, and we can focus the mind in a state of trance by which we get bliss or ananda. Now, is bliss something that you can get from taking drugs? Absolutely not. No, that's just a type of mental pleasure sensation. It's an illusion, really. So we can take different drugs that alter our state of mind and that cause us to experience different illusory states. But ananda, or bliss, is something that comes from the Atma. So what's the thing that wraps the Atma? Is ahankar. Ahankar is that first covering of the Atma. It connects the non-material Atma to the other layers of material existence, and it provides our sense of identity, ownership, and what I like to call doingness, the sense of being the doer of actions. We have this idea that when I do something, oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Actually, we are kind of part of a machine. And Sri Krishna also explains this in Bhagavad Gita. We are associated with the gunas of material nature, and we are kind of, it's like a machine, and we're pushing different buttons, and we think that we are doing something because I make my arms and legs and fingers move, but actually there are ingredients that we're activating, and we identify with what we do. So the word ahankar literally comes from aham, I, plus krit, to do. So ahankara, what I do. That is literally the meaning of ahankar. The next layer is intellect, or buddhi. Now, we talk about these layers. These are components of consciousness, right? They all work together. The ego, intellect, and mind all work together, but we talk about them as if they are completely separate things, because they do have different attributes and they have different areas. So for analytical purposes, we're talking about these different components of consciousness separately. And intellect is where we do our discrimination, our logic, our reasoning, and memory. And buddhi is very intimately connected with the mind and resides mostly in the head. The buddhi may motivate the mind, but can also be influenced to rationalize action according to desires. In modern psychology, a very good example of interaction between mind and intellect is something called cognitive dissonance. In cognitive dissonance, we perceive something that we know is, we run up against something that we know is true or not true, but we still hold on to it because we've invested so much in it. It's called cognitive dissonance because the cognition part, the buddhi, knows that something's wrong, but the mind keeps holding on to this idea simply because I've invested so much into it. I don't want to let go, right? Anyway, so let's talk about the mind component of consciousness. So manas, or mind, resides in the heart. It is intimately connected with intellect and ego, and it manifests the consciousness of the Atma in connection with the body and the senses. It is also the center of all sense activity, and its main occupations are thinking, feeling, and willing. So we'll talk about that. Now, in terms of the place, in mind, we say primarily resides in the heart. Other philosophers have suggested that the mind also resides in the head. And of course, physiologically, according to medical science, we would say that it is in the cerebral cortex where we process our mind, we process all of the different things, the impressions of the senses. That would be a place where the mind also resides. But without a doubt, we feel things in our heart area, because this is where the Atma resides, according to Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Keshagrashata bhagasya shatadha kalpitasya cha. And it is said, Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati. Krishna says in the Gita that the Atma, or soul, resides within the region of the heart. So we definitely have our feelings, and we say, I went with my heart, because this is a thing that we experience. Okay, so let's talk about the thinking, feeling, and willing aspects. So the mind is the center of all sense activity, and our perception of what is pleasure and what is painful takes place in the mind. And our consciousness permeates the entire body through the circulation of vital energy, or pran. So what do we mean by thinking, feeling, and willing? These are actually very important functions or occupations of the mind. And let's try to understand those in depth. Our activities arise from thinking, feeling, and willing. So let's go through a little progression. I see someone eating ice cream, and what does that make me do? It makes me think about it. Well, guess what? Advertisement people know all about this. If they put a picture of something, they're going to try to create an association. We are being bombarded in Western culture constantly with people who are trying to inject thinking into us. Why? Because thinking leads to feeling. Now I start feeling like I want to have some ice cream. And then what happens when we get that feeling? I get up. The will to action results. I get up to go get some. Oh, I've got some in the freezer. I'm going to go have me some of that mint chocolate chip. And as soon as I say mint chocolate chip, somebody's going to say, yum, I love mint chocolate chip ice cream. And someone else is going to say, yuck, I absolutely hate it. I hate it. Don't even tell me mint and chocolate chip in the same sentence because I don't like it, right? Well, that's an example of how we experience things. It's not in our tongue. We're actually tasting things in our mind. Now, this is about thinking, feeling, and willing. So that was a little digression. But the intellect might intervene here and say, wait a minute, hold on there. If you eat ice cream, this is not going to help you lose weight. Atul, you are already overweight. Dude, you really should lose some weight, and eating ice cream is not good. And then maybe Atul says, I should probably, I'll have an apple or a glass of water instead. Anyway, every action has consequences. This is also very important. So thinking, feeling, willing, and will leads to action, and then action gives us consequences. And what do those consequences involve? They also affect our consciousness. These are also called impressions or sanskars. When we have effects of action over a long period of time, this it's called impression or sanskar. And this is an impression. It changes us in some way. It may be in a small way. Sometimes there are things that are disturbing. We see something that we can't unsee, especially if it's a negative or a disturbing image. Positive impressions can also stay with us. I used to work with a company that did web filtering systems and software, right? And I was one of the software engineers there. There was a room downstairs where they had people who sat, and their job was to look at all the different websites that were out there on the web and categorize them. And it sounds somewhat innocuous, but a lot of them, they would look at sites that were specifically about disturbing images. And I mean really disturbing images. And those people had to rotate out and do other things. They could not handle doing that day in and day out for too long. They would have to rotate those people and let them have a chance to do something else. Because if you see really disturbing images, even if it's just to say, oh, all right, this is a site that shows videos of people doing horrible things to each other, it affects you. We are affected by things we see. And it may be a subtle effect, or it may be just this was so disturbing, I can't get it out of my head. We've all experienced things like that. So this leads us to discussing conscious and subconscious. What is our subconscious? We have impressions from our previous lives. And this is all, I said this is all connected. We tie together all of these ideas of consciousness, Atma, moving from body to body, and this is all connected. So we keep impressions from previous lives. Even though we don't have specific memories of our previous lives, we do have impressions. We start out with a new set of memories, but we have old impressions and conditioning. Our impressions from previous lives might affect us. It might be irrational fears. We might be strongly attracted to a particular path in life. So let's say if I was connected with music, I might have a natural inclination from an early age to take up playing the piano or the violin or singing or something like that. Or it might be a fear thing. I might have a really strong fear of water. Maybe I died from drowning in a previous life, and I have this very strong fear of water. I can't explain it. Somebody says, oh, this is an irrational fear. You're being irrational about it. Well, that's easy for you to say, but it is a thing for me, right? Everybody can relate to this. This is the consciousness and subconscious, according to this Sankhya and Ayurveda view of consciousness. It's very important. So, how does this relate? Conditioning. We try to learn behavior in this life so that the mind becomes conditioned. There may be conditioning that's imposed. Our parents or our teachers, they may want to have us do things that become good habits. You should get up, you should bathe every morning, you should wear clean clothes, you should clean your area, you should make up your bed, brush your teeth, do all these things, create good habits. This is conditioning. And actions usually do condition us in some way. We might choose to do something. Let's say we choose to do a yoga class, and it'll condition us mentally, physically. The circulation of prana, it may help clear things that muddy the waters of consciousness, because the mind adapts. This, if there is one takeaway from all this entire presentation, the mind is incredibly adaptable. Sometimes the mind adapts slowly, but it does it continuously. And we don't even notice sometimes until, one day we wake up and we say, hey, wait a minute, I have now realized that I believed things when I was young that I'm older and I believe differently. I've changed my political orientation. I've realized that, my sexuality is different than I thought it was when I was a kid. I've realized something different about myself. There's certain types of food that I like, and I was trying to like it to please someone else, and I'm not going to do that anymore. But the mind sometimes takes a while to change, but the mind can adapt, and it can adapt in very profound ways. Once we have been conditioned to do something, it can be very hard to break, especially if we develop a bad habit. If we develop a habit, let's say, of manipulating others, of doing guilt trips and doing other things, other manipulative behaviors, or bullying people, these are bad habits that can be hard to break. And oftentimes we want to try to break conditioning that we've just fallen into a bad rut. Like, with me, it's snacking. I'll eat more than I need to, and it's a tough conditioned response to break. It's sometimes a response to stress. So what's another attribute of the mind? The mind is like a sponge. If you put a sponge in ink, what's going to happen? The ink is going to absorb, the sponge is going to absorb the ink. It's going to change its color. It's going to become darkened by the ink. If you put a sponge in dirty water, it's going to get dirty. It's going to absorb some dirt. You'd have to put it in clean water and wash it and rinse it. If you put it in some very sticky, dirty thing, it might take a lot of washing and rinsing. Now, the mind is also like this. We absorb the emotions of others. This is one of these things that, if you go to the, people who only follow what's in the scientific perspective, they're going to say, well, there's no evidence that indicates this. You can't prove it. But, we know it intuitively. We have all been around other people, and I say we because my experience has been that just about anybody who's signed up for these courses in Ayurveda is a person who's sensitive to the emotional energy of others, right? Um, we will tend to absorb others' emotions. We become sensitive, and we also radiate different emotions. So the mind is a subtle entity. It's got antenna on it. It's got emitters. It's got transmitters. It's not just a chemical process in the brain. It does have a relation to chemical processes in the brain, but it's more than that. You know, if you sit next to someone who has really dirty thoughts, and I say dirty not in the sense of, uh, you, you, sexually related, but I mean dirty in terms of bad, evil, hateful, uh, selfish, perverted. These are things that we can sense, and we are around other people because we didn't have a choice. Let's say you're on public transportation and you just can't wait to get off at the next stop to get away from this person who sat next to you, right? And we radiate different emotions. So we try to understand the mind through analytical processes because of this subtlety and its ability to be affected by our environment. Um, so we feel the presence of others, and we can sense the consciousness of others. If we're around spiritually developed persons, we may feel some enlightenment, we may feel some lightness, we may feel happiness, we may feel that, oh, this person explained the same thing I've heard before, and it suddenly made more sense. And then you may be around others who have very negative energy, and we just feel, oh, I got a really bad vibe from that person. Bad actions, bad thoughts, and bad speech leads to bad consciousness. You cannot, if you are, doing bad things and thinking bad things and speaking badly, meaning you are, doing a lot of unnecessary swearing and criticizing others and saying really bad and horrible things, it leads to bad consciousness. Like, and in the West, people make jokes about dying and stuff like that, oh, I hope you don't die in a car accident or something like that. In Vedic culture, we take these kind of things seriously. We don't make jokes about it because, it's like sometimes people feel that it's inviting fate, but it's actually creating a kind of a negative vibe, and we avoid that. If there's a very large accumulation of negative energy, it tends to spill out into the environment. I usually feel this myself if I go to a place, like Las Vegas can be a fun place to visit, but I find it's a real magnet for people with a very negative way of thinking, people who just want to win and gain and more and more and more and more. And there's a lot of greedy people who gravitate towards that, apart from all the indoor smoking, of course. I find that it is a place where there tends to be a lot of negative energy, and I can only handle it in very small doses. So if there's a very large accumulation of negative energy, it will tend to spill out into the general environment. So what can we do to cleanse? Well, we know how to cleanse the body. We bathe, we put on clean clothes, we follow a good diet, we can do some herbs, we can sometimes do panchakarma. There are also things that cleanse the mind, to do meditation, to practice yoga, which is a process for enabling meditation, making healthy choices in our sensory input, in our surroundings, and the people we associate with. Here's a very important thing. If we associate people who are disturbed, it will be disturbing to us. Now, sometimes it's our job, like if my job is that I'm a therapist or a social worker, um, or I work in mental health, I may have to associate with people who are disturbed, but I'm trying to also keep my own focus and not become disturbed, right? We need also to be around people who have a positive outlook and who bring joy and light and happiness to us. This is actually important. And this is a big thing. I would say it's almost like there's a pandemic of having a lack of good people to associate with in modern times. We have amazing technology. At least in some countries, we have affordable health care and we have a good quality of life. But the ability to find people who can be close friends that we can trust and who give us a positive vibe, it's becoming harder. We're under more pressure. We're in workplaces sometimes where negative energy is encouraged and there's backstabbing and other things like that. So this can be very tough. Modern life is hard on the Atma. Putting ourselves in a pristine, natural setting has a natural cleansing effect on the mind. And finally, when we do meditation, we should have a connection between the Atma and the unlimited divine. It should be a type of communion or connection. Otherwise, it's kind of like I'm going to go stand in the shower but not turn on the water. We need that divine connection because we are a spark of the divine. By whatever name you call the divine, we are a spark. We're a part of it. And we need that connection because we are very tiny, we can become overwhelmed by the waves of the different things that are present in this material world. So let's talk about meditation. So a steady mind is very, very difficult to achieve. If you do the exercise where I say, all right, stop thinking, what are you going to not think about? I'm going to start thinking. If you tell me to stop thinking, I'm going to think of all the things that I am going to be not thinking about, first of all. And I've already lost that battle. It's really hard to have a steady mind and to be calm. The mind is always in motion, and the mind is the center of our thinking, feeling, willing, and sense perception. If you've seen a monkey that's moving around. Monkey's always moving, scampering here and scampering there and snatching at things and moving around. And that's kind of what the mind is like. Everything that we do is going to create further activity in the mind. So stopping the mind and focusing is very difficult. It takes a lot of work. It takes discipline and practice. We can do mind-body prana balancing. There's outward direction of prana through Tai Chi and Qigong and yogis who can do physically impossible things. There have been demonstrations of these things. It's not really, accepted by modern science, but there are reliable people who've made reliable accounts and observed these things. There's also the inwardly directed balancing, where we regulate the circulation of prana. And yoga, and as well as qigong and tai chi, they also do balancing of the circulation of prana. The asanas that we do in yoga are meant to help calm and balance the circulation of prana. And why is this important? Because the prana circulation is how the atma, or the self, permeates through our entire physical existence. So the balance of the prana helps to balance the mind. It's a two-way interaction between the mind and pran. The pran is allowing our consciousness to be felt in all parts of our body. So if I hold my hand out and I visualize that I'm extending my force, my vitality through my hand, That is pran that is doing this. And I'm saying pran in the general sense. There are these 5 primary, prana, pan, udan, saman, vyan, and then the 5 secondary, devadatta, krikra, kudamara, dhananjaya. But we're saying pran here in the general sense. So what about food? We have many problems that begin from digestion. Poor digestion leads to malabsorption, and this can lead to the buildup of ama or toxins. Our addictive eating habits can also lead to imbalance. Consciousness can dictate what we think we need, but it's often just conditioning. For example, I grew up in the 60s, and the meat mythology was really popular. When I became a vegetarian, my mom insisted I go talk to the family doctor, and he was saying, well, if you don't eat a lot of red meat, you're going to be weak and sick and anemic. Of course, it was, later on the medical profession did change their tune on that, thankfully. But, consciousness can sometimes dictate what we think we need. And changes in diet often require a change in consciousness. Trying to get someone to change their diet. When we have people who come to us for consultations, they sometimes have very unhealthy diets, especially, like in Texas, the red meat breakfast, lunch, and dinner people. But if they're faced with a really life-threatening chronic health condition, sometimes it's easier to get people to change that. Say, well, what do you want? Do you want to keep, having eggs and bacon for breakfast, or would you rather die an early death? And that sometimes can get people to actually change. And then we find that when people change their diet, they sometimes are able to change their consciousness, and that makes it easier to make even more lifestyle changes. So there's a connection between food and consciousness. Finally, there are the 5 layers, or panchakosh. So panchakosh means these 5 layers or levels of awareness. They're sometimes also referred to as the 5 sheaths. I don't like that term sheath for panchakosh. It's a literal translation of kosh, but they are really layers. So going from the outside to the inside, we have annamaya. It's the level of awareness of consumption, eating and putting things in the mouth, and it's very physical. There's pranamaya, the level of awareness of action and the circulation of vital force, or pran. Movement, activity, defense, and fitness are what primarily happens on this level. It's mostly physical. Manomaya is the level of awareness of mind and the functions of thinking, feeling, and willing. It's our emotional awareness, our relationship awareness, our emotional intelligence, tasting different types of sensory input, such as music, drama, art, refined tastes in food, as opposed to just gross consumption, exploration of thoughts, speculations, and fantasies. It might use the physical senses, or it may be entirely mental. The Jnanamaya is the level of awareness of intellect and the functions of logic, discrimination, memory, and classification. When we do scientific discovery, debate, have philosophical and intellectual achievements, or if we want to have an argument and a debate, this is happening in the Vijnanamaya layer. It's usually connected with the mind. If, pure intellectualism would imply that the mind is not involved, and that's very difficult to achieve. But we exist on all these layers. And finally, the innermost is Anandamaya. Anandamaya is the layer of bliss, spiritual awareness, and that Anandamayobhyasat, that tendency of the Atma to seek unadulterated bliss. So we have these 5 layers of awareness. Just to recap, these are the layers or levels of awareness. They are usually mixed and they interact, and we can understand them through life. So think about a little baby, right? The baby's mouth is open. Everything goes in the mouth, right? If you've ever tried to childproof a house, if you ever looked after a toddler or a small child, it's like you have to always be on your alert because they want to put things in their mouth. They might swallow something and choke on it. They might eat something that's harmful to them. This is annamaya. And then what happens with children? They want to play all the time. This is pranamaya. Hey, can you stop playing and come in and eat? No, I don't want. I want to stay up and play all day. And then they'll come in, later, and they'll say, "I'm hungry. Where did the time go?" Okay, that's the child. Older children, adolescents, music, drama, books, and TV. This is manomaya now. I'm absorbed in all these things that are experienced in the mind. And then the young adult, they're now interested in their studies, going to university, having intellectual achievements, feeling that I've learned something and I'm going to make something of my life. And then the Anandamaya layer, we try to fulfill that through our different spiritual pursuits, whether we express it through a spiritual process, through humanism, through religion, or whatever. This is our attempt to experience Anandamaya. Even if someone says they're an atheist, I'm going to say that, well, you're either a secular humanist or you're a sociopath, because and you are trying to express Anandamaya through secular humanism, through having a connection with humanity. Anyway, that's the entire presentation. This was a lot to cover. And any questions about this? I know there's a lot of material here, and it's a lot to absorb. But I hope this has made sense and, given you some background here on the mind in Ayurveda and in some of the ways that it's connected. In one sense, this is kind of like taking you up to 10,000 feet and going through the really high level view. But we really just want you to start thinking about these things, think about these things in a different way. And, and you need to have time to let this sink in, and, broaden your perspectives somewhat. All right. Well, I am going to stop there. I think we'll have a short break, and I'm not sure what the next segment is going to be, but this will be your time to have a break. And thank you very much, and namaste.